All right. Hello. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Dr. Tiffany Rao, and I am from the Department of Special Education here at Cal State Fullerton. This is our third webinar of my fall series, Addressing Big Behaviors, number 3 of 4. There will be one more after this. And today I'm going to be talking about students who have a serious lack of academic engagement, specifically students who just seem to be doing almost no work all day or no work in a particular subject or very, very little. And maybe you've tried some things and you're just not able to kind of break through that behavior. So first, I'll start by defining exactly what I mean by severe lack of academic engagement. I will talk about some of the possible functions of this behavior, some strategies to increase engagement. I'm going to give you a lot of different ideas. I will give you an example of a social story. I gave you an example last time of a social story for verbal threats, so I will give you an example for this issue. I'll give you a list of reinforcement ideas and some resources on that. And then, like I said, we'll have questions and answers at the end. And at that time, I'll stop recording and you can go ahead and ask about any specific situations that you are dealing with. But all throughout, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, especially if you need clarification on something. I definitely don't want anyone to be confused. I want you to have a good understanding of everything. So I welcome questions. You can unmute yourself or put your question in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. I don't always see the chat right away just because I'm talking at the same time, but I will check that as I remember. And one thing that I want to say before I get started, the biggest, most impactful thing that you can do for any of these big behaviors I've been talking about is have a relentless willingness to pursue so many different things to try, so many different ideas and tricks and strategies. You've got to be really relentless about it and be willing to not give up, even after you've tried 10 or 15 things. So when I was a teacher, for every 20 new ideas I would try, I would maybe get 5 that worked to some degree, a couple that worked a little bit, and I was willing to keep using it because it worked enough, and then maybe one like game changer. So it's important to take everything that you can, realize the majority of it might not work with this one student, but if you don't give up, you will find things that work and you will be able to see that behavior turn around with diligence on your part. And it's so rewarding when that happens. It just might take trying a lot of different things. And you can be gathering so many tools and strategies for your arsenal from things like this webinar and other professional development opportunities from your professors, your clinical coach, other teachers, your peers, also reading journal articles, especially teaching exceptional children. That one is my absolute favorite because it's very practical. Blogs, CEC, the Council for Exceptional Children, they have a member forum where special education teachers go on and share a dilemma or a problem that they're dealing with, and then they get lots of support and feedback. So that there are just so many different opportunities for you to really be gathering a lot of different ideas. All
Hi,
right.
handsome.
So I hopefully you will find some things that are helpful. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and mute anyone who's not muted and then, okay. All right, so you can access these slides through this QR code, pull it up on your phone and email it to yourself or save it. And then I do have some links within these slides, so I do recommend pulling them. How do we access your webinars from the library? That's a great question. That was in the chat. If you, at the end, I will share, I might already have it in here. I can't remember. I will share the YouTube link. Um, and I can also actually put something in the chat. So I will do that at the end. I'll make a note to share the link to other webinars because we have a huge library of webinars. I've done some of them, but also a lot of other professors on a lot of different topics. Okay. All right, I'll give everyone another 3 seconds to get these slides. All right. Okay. So what is a severe lack of academic engagement? How am I defining this for today? Basically, just not participating in a large majority of instruction or practice activities in one or more subjects. So maybe you have a student that, math is easy for them and they like it. And so they participate in math, but then they totally shut down for reading or whatever, or it's across the board. And they do this either by maybe leaving the classroom, elopement, putting their head down on their desk, or just complete, like, kind of refusal to participate. Maybe they're just sitting there. I'm not including not doing homework. I'm not talking about homework. Um, to me, that's not a priority. That was never a priority for me as a teacher. I prefer to focus on what we can control, and that is the hours that they are at school. We cannot control what they're doing at home. It is my professional and personal opinion that homework is overdone, and I would prefer to see no homework so that kids can go home and be kids. They've already been at school for 6 hours, focusing and, having a lot of demands placed on them. And I think that their time after school should be more unstructured and involve family time and sports and games and playing outside. So that's my personal and professional opinion. So I'm not including homework. Also, I'm not talking about just not listening. There can be a lot of different reasons that a student appears to not be listening. I'm not exactly talking about that if they're still doing some work, or if they're doing half the work. Maybe that's the amount of work that's appropriate for them. They're doing half, that's pretty okay in my book. It doesn't mean that we're not going to shoot for more and try and help them do more. But yet, the same principles that I'm going to talk about could still apply to those situations. I just don't consider those a severe lack of engagement. Okay, possible functions behind academic engagement. Now, one thing I want to mention too is when you are dealing with a dilemma that you're facing in teaching, it's a good idea to remember the classes that you've taken in your credential program. It goes by so fast, you're learning so much all at once that often it's a blur when all is said and done. But I want you to remember that you have learned a lot of really good information. And so it can be worthwhile to go back to your notes, go back to your materials, your textbook, and revisit to kind of jog your memory about a lot of things. So in SPED 522, you have, or you will, or you are learning about doing a functional behavioral analysis. So that can be a helpful place to start. When we're looking at antecedents, a lot of times, or I'm sorry, when we're looking at the function behind behaviors, we're kind of looking at an overall, it's for attention, it's for escape, it's sensory. There's kind of these basic areas that the function might fall under. But I wanted to get into some of the more nuanced functions behind academic disengagement specifically, because it's not always quite so cut and dry, like it's just because they want to escape. It's not always exactly that. They might want to escape because the content is too challenging or too easy. But I still don't feel escape always quite captures what's happening. So maybe it's too hard and maybe it's too easy. That is why progress monitoring, frequent assessments are so important. If you can rule that out, then you can keep going. But if you see that they're in your small reading group and their assessments are showing that they are really, really struggling, then it might be time to pull way back on the level. Or they're acing it, they need to be moved up a group. Those are nice because they're sometimes a very easy fix. Maybe the content is too repetitive. Uh, Sometimes the content is right on target, but the instruction is not an appropriate fit. So we can see this sometimes with students who have dyslexia, where they are at grade level or close to grade level, but our instruction is not reaching them the way that they learn. So we have to tweak things and change things and teach them in the way that they learn, which is probably going to be a more direct instruction approach and looking at what the assessments are showing, reflecting, and then changing things until we get that just right fit. Maybe the environment is not an appropriate fit. So I'll give you an example from my own experience. I had a first through third grade SDC class for a while, and I ran it like a first through third grade class. And then they gave me a kindergartner. And that kindergarten student needed a kindergarten environment. They had to put the student somewhere, and for the time being, my class was the best fit, but it really wasn't because he needed a big kindergarten rug and he needed all the songs and the movement and all of that. And I wasn't doing that. I mean, I was doing some, a little bit. So I had to kind of create this new environment that would be more inclusive of his needs as well, because he was not at a level where he could sit in a desk for every subject like my third graders would. He needed to be on the floor. He needed to be running around. So I had to get really creative and restructure my environment to fit his needs. Maybe the content does not feel relevant to the student. It feels like this is a waste of time. They might have a lack of motivation, a lack of autonomy in learning. They don't feel like they have a lot of control. Maybe there's a lack of meaningful feedback. I'm going to give strategies for all of these in the next slides, but maybe the student feels disconnected from their peers and or their teachers. There might be some external stressors that's on the student's mind, and it just makes it really hard to focus on school. There might be internal barriers, such as ADHD, some distracting thoughts, some intrusive thoughts. There might be some sensory issues, making it very hard to focus and engage. There might not be enough opportunities in your teaching for active engagement. So that's something really important to just look at and reflect on. Is it mostly you talking and students doing a worksheet, and there's not a lot of time for active engagement? Maybe they just find it boring, or maybe they've failed a lot in the past and they've given up. Okay. All right. And Jola, you asked how about ADHD? So yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about with the internal barriers is that can definitely be a reason behind a lack of academic engagement. So what to do? First off, you got to figure out what the function of the behavior is. If it is, but even before that, if it's appropriate to the student's level of communication, I would always start by having a genuine conversation with that student from a place of care and compassion and just genuine curiosity. Um, Avoid lecturing or any kind of punitive approach. This isn't the time to lay down the law and be like, hey, you're not getting enough work done. What's going on? They're not going to open up. So instead, you want to come from this more genuine place of kindness. Hey, what's going on? It seems like you don't like math. Will you tell me more about that? Because I really care about you and I want to understand where you're coming from. You're not in any trouble. And just kind of a reassuring approach like that. Also, discuss with parents, again, from a place of genuine care, curiosity, and compassion. Remember that parents are going to have insights that we don't see. So there might be something going on at home. There might have been a lot of changes. The parent might say, oh, yeah, that happens at home, but here's what I do. And then you can start taking data on antecedents, behavior, and consequences. If you've taken SPED 522 or an advanced behavior class, you know what I'm talking about. But just in case you haven't taken that yet, antecedents is what's happening right before. You say it's math time, that might be the antecedent, and then the behavior is their head goes down on the desk and they don't do anything. And then what's the consequence? The consequence means what happens? What do they get out of that behavior? Do they get out of math? Or does everyone kind of like come over to the student and give them a lot of attention? That can all be very insightful in terms of figuring out why this behavior is happening. But again, think of the more nuanced causes that might be at play as well. And if appropriate, conduct an FBA, a functional behavioral analysis, and maybe a behavior intervention plan. But this isn't obviously like an aggressive or a violent behavior. So usually BIPs are more for those kinds of serious behaviors. And then, yeah, Danielle mentioned the student could also be perseverating on things. Absolutely. That could be another internal barrier where they're having these thoughts and just really perseverating on something and they can't really break out of that to engage in school. So that's a great point. All right. So now here is what you do. You've figured out, hopefully, or you have some good guesses about the function behind this behavior. So if you're thinking it's too boring or the instruction's not a good fit, here are some things that you can do. Spice it up. Number one, experiment with increasing or decreasing the difficulty and the pacing of the lesson. So if assessments are showing or not showing, but it's like you have a hunch that it might be too hard or too easy, but you're not sure which, then experiment. Make it a little harder. Give them a little more of a challenge. See if that sparks their interest. And then maybe pull back after that. Take some notes on what you observe. Pacing means maybe you're actually going too slow and the student is getting bored or frustrated. So try picking up the pace or slowing down. And again, take notes and get some data out of that. Is it too repetitive? How can you still give a lot of practice opportunities? Because we know that in special education, most of our students need a lot of opportunity to practice new skills. That is important. But can you make it less repetitive? Can you be changing up those practice opportunities? How can you scaffold your instruction? How can you break it down into smaller steps? That might be what's needed. What other accommodations and strategies can you try? How can you make it more relevant to the student and their life and their interests? So I'm posing these as questions because I know you all have anything from preschool to high school and you teach all different subjects and students. So I can't really even give you a comprehensive of maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. I mean, I'm doing that, but really it's the questions that's most important. You asking these questions and then racking your brain, looking in your arsenal, adding more things to your arsenal, and trying things based on those questions. Are students expected to mostly listen and then complete an assignment or a worksheet? Okay, sometimes we get a little bit stuck in a rut because that's how we observed somebody teaching, a mentor teacher, or we were an aide and that's how the teacher did it. And so that's kind of how we're doing it. But that approach to teaching sometimes is appropriate, but it shouldn't really be that every day. If it was mostly students having to listen and then complete a worksheet, I would expect most of the students to really start feeling checked out. So you want to think about, how can I make this more fun? How can I increase active engagement? One thing is gamify your instruction, include more technology or more hands-on games and manipulatives. You can integrate sensory experiences. Anytime you can make food or smells or music part of the learning, that's going to make it a lot more fun and a lot more engaging. And it also helps the learning stick to their long-term memory. And kinesthetic, get them up and moving. Even up through junior high, kids still have a lot of antsy energy and kind of need opportunities to move. And then one of my favorite ways to spice up a lesson, because it makes it really fun for the teacher as well as the students, is to incorporate a sense of mystery or surprise. So you can look up things like mystery box, lesson using a mystery box. You can use you can play some music and say, what do you think I am about to teach you about based on this music? Like giving kind of a little clue and a little hint, making them be detectives to kind of figure out what's going to happen next. So that's a fun way to spice it up. Also might need to change the environment. So I started to touch on this earlier, but you might need to ask yourself, is the environment too distracting? Is there too much up on your walls? Is it messy and cluttered? Um, are the desks set up in a way that they're all facing the window and they're all looking outside? So sometimes it helps to almost like zoom out and look at your class, think about looking at it from a different perspective, and think about what might be an issue that you didn't notice before. Is it too boring? Do you not have anything up on your walls? Is it kind of just bland? Is it just desks in a row? And how could you change that up? Could you put the desks together? Could you put them in a U shape or a open box kind of a shape? Add some more things to the walls. Is it too noisy or too quiet? So do you have music playing and maybe you have nice classical music playing, and I love that and I used to do that too, but is it up too loud? Or some students are distracted by that, even nice classical music. So you might want to try not having that and see if the student is able to pay better attention. Or is it too quiet and you might want to try some background music or white noise? Is there a sensory issue that you do not notice? Is there a flickering light that's never bothered you before, but it could be bothering one student and they don't even know, or they don't know how to tell you that it's bothering them? You can talk to your custodian or your principal if there is something like that. Or is there a buzzing sound that you have tuned out for months, but there's one student who cannot tune that out? Other ideas of changing up the environment is rearranging the classroom periodically. I would always do this after winter break, and they would come back in January and it would be like rearranged. It was always kind of fun, and I would get a huge increase in engagement overall. And some years I would do that more often. I would do that maybe 4 times a year because it just helped to spice things up and re-engage my students. Or maybe you can go outside for certain subjects. Maybe you're going to have your read aloud outside whenever the weather is nice. And then also ask, is the environment developmentally appropriate? I gave the example of my kindergarten student when I had previously a first through third grade class. It's also important to think about that if your students are at a level of development that is younger than their age. And so you might have a group of second graders, but they really need some kind of elements of a kindergarten classroom where they can be getting up and moving around and engaging in play. Um, Same kind of a thing in junior high. Sometimes junior high so there's I always like to draw a parallel sometimes between kindergartners and junior high kids because kindergartners still have a lot of toddler in them. They're kind of like half kid, half toddler, or 70% kid and 30% still toddler. And so they still need some elements of preschool, especially in the early months of kindergarten. And the same thing with junior high. They're like in between, right? They're kind of half kid, half teenager, or still mostly kid, and maybe 20% becoming a teenager. So they still, even though there's not really recess anymore in junior high, they still need time to be getting some energy out and they still need to play. So it's important to consider that their level of development might be different from what they look like to you or what you might assume from their age. Okay. Ways to increase motivation. So they might feel a lack of autonomy. They might not feel a lot of ownership over the instruction that they're receiving and over what they're learning. And this is really important. So you can increase their autonomy through choices, giving them choices on what assignment to complete. Okay, you can choose this or this. You don't have to give a ton of choices, maybe just two, but one should be maybe more writing and maybe one is more oral, or one's a presentation and one is a test. Choices of assessments, an essay or multiple choice. Choice of topics. If they could choose between 3 different topics and maybe they vote as a class, maybe you're not going to want to teach, you got to make it practical for yourself. But even letting them vote as a class, what should we study in science next? We're going to study these 3 subtopics. What should we do first if it works out like that? Choice of reinforcers, which goals to work on, or what order to complete tasks. Also, we want to make sure they are not feeling like their work is a waste of time and you're never looking at it. So we want to provide meaningful feedback on their work. And then this is huge. This was a game changer for me, is the 5-to-1 rule, if you haven't heard about this. And this applies to so many things in life, not just teaching, but 5-to-1. For every one piece of constructive feedback you give, make sure that you are providing 5 pieces of positive feedback through genuine, specific praise, rewards, high fives, etc. It's impossible to actually keep count of this, but it's just a rule to keep in mind that you are overdoing the positive feedback, and then they are going to be so much more receptive to that piece of constructive feedback that you give. And then make sure that you are providing effective instruction and truly helpful corrective feedback to increase their success and combat their fear of failure. So they may have failed. Maybe you teach RSP and you just got a new student who has never qualified yet for special education, but they're in 3rd grade and they've been failing since kindergarten. Okay. You're going to have to combat that fear of failure. And it's not going to be a surprise if they show up and they don't want to engage. So you're going to make sure you're giving them really effective direct instruction, research-based, the type of stuff that you're learning in our program, and very helpful corrective feedback so that they are seeing growth themselves. And if instruction's not working for one student, we have to reflect and change it, sometimes many times over. That's why we embed that reflective piece. What would you do differently next time? In like all of your student teaching and every single lesson plan that you write, because we want to exercise that muscle in you so that it becomes really automatic. Okay, Christine shared Quizlet is great for this. Lets the students choose what type of test they want for the content. Great game and practice tool. Thank you for sharing that resource. I have not used Quizlet, so I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds really great. Okay, everything starts with the connection that we have with our students. If your student is not feeling connected to you, then they are less likely to feel connected to what you're teaching and what you're bringing. Research shows that when students feel a strong connection to their teacher, a strong and positive connection to their teacher, they are more likely to feel connected to the content and with their peers and to the school community as a whole. So it is worth your investment of time to connect with your students and keep connecting with them. Keep strengthening that connection. You can do this by being just a really fun, approachable, and affirming teacher. And that might come naturally to you, or it might be something you kind of have to practice. But really thinking about how you can constantly affirm your students. Like when they share an idea, I want you to show up for that idea. They're being vulnerable, right? They ask a question, they share an idea. I don't care how off, off topic it might be. Um, you can still be like, wow, that's really interesting, or thanks for asking, or that's a great idea, or great question. Okay, you can always have an affirming response. Obviously, if they're trying to throw you off or be disruptive, that's kind of not what I'm talking about here. But you can infuse fun and games into lessons. Have genuine fun engaging with the students. Make sure your students leave every day feeling like you like being with them through the way that you interact with them. Increase peer engagement through games, collaborative activities, working on things together, and meaningful discussions that they find interesting. Junior high time is such a fun stage for throwing out really new prompts, for letting them think about things they've never been asked before. Think about things that's going on in the world. What's their opinion about things? It's there at that stage and through high school. So you can really take advantage of that. And take time off from academics to connect and have fun. And I'm not talking about having a movie day. I'm not against that once in a great while, but I want this to be a time when you are connecting and you're present with each other. So that could just be learning about their interests, um, genuinely finding out what they like, go outside, play games together, do art together just for the sake of art with no objectives attached, and do it with them, alongside them. Sit down with them and just start painting, play some music, drawing, painting, whatever. But have fun. And it doesn't have to have any instructional objectives attached. And then also part of connection is keep building your toolbox and strategies of culturally responsive teaching. This is very important. Sometimes students are disengaged because they don't feel a connection. They don't feel like their identities are reflected or affirmed in school. So it's important to create space for diverse viewpoints and always, like I said, be affirming students' responses, ideas, opinions, and feelings. And I'm going to share some strategies on the next slide. One more thing in the chat. Vladimir said, my students like Blooket for reviewing material. It also allows them to win. Even if they don't have the highest accuracy, it gamifies material. Thank you. I love these. I'm going to write both of these down. I've heard of them. I just haven't used them myself, so I want to learn more about them. Love these resources that you're sharing. Thank you. So, like I said, there are links, so be sure to access these slides. But these are 3 links that I really like, just for, again, adding to your toolbox of culturally responsive teaching strategies and approaches. I really like this one because it's specific to special education. And then this is a whole toolkit. And then Edutopia is a great resource for a lot of different things. Really cool. Oh, okay. After I finish the next 2 slides, I'm going to go back and share the QR code one more time for anybody who might have popped in after that. Oh, one more. Thank you, Danielle. The kids like playing Kahoots and doing board games that have an academic touch, like sight word bingo, social skills board game. Yeah, awesome. Awesome ideas. So external stressors, we can't control what happens outside of school, but there's a lot that we can address during the hours that they are at school, such as providing a predictable routine and expectations. I pretty much always see this in special education classrooms and most general education classrooms as well. So you're probably already doing this, but you can even think just like, how can I make it even more predictable? Am I using enough visuals to show what we're going to do every day? Would it be helpful to add PECs or something like that, or a schedule on every student's desk in addition to the schedule on the board? Like, how can you just make it even more predictable? Because that helps settle a mind that feels unstructured inside. Having food and water readily available. So if that might be an external stressor, if students are, coming to school hungry, if you can have food and water available anytime they want it, that's my preference, but that is not always practical. But I was just observing in a classroom the other day, and a student was didn't get to finish their lunch, and it was right after lunch. And so the teacher said, well, you can finish it right now. I'm going to start the lesson. You can eat at your desk and finish your lunch. It was no big deal. It was not a distraction. And I just really loved seeing that. Creating a comforting environment, making it feel like a little bit like home, or a home away from home, so that when students walk into the classroom, it just feels good. I used to do this by I used like essential oils, lavender and chamomile, and it was all very natural because I'm also aware some students are sensitive to perfume and things like that. So I just made a very diluted kind of water spray of chamomile and lavender essential oils, and I would spray it in the morning. And it wasn't strong, but it was just kind of calming. Also, just a simple little lamp. They have little mini lamps for like $7 at Walmart or Target, and just it can create this nice cozy feel. Some people use like Christmas lights over in a corner. And I like it when teachers also have kind of a comforting persona, I guess, where kids just want to run up and hug you. That's a really great place to go when you're a student. Showing genuine care, working closely with families to understand those outside stressors and provide resources, taking care of our mental health so that we can stay emotionally regulated and feel like a safe place. We don't want students coming to school not sure what their teacher's mood is going to be. We want them to feel like, okay, my teacher's always calm. Or if they lose their cool, they apologize. And that feels safe. And then again, I can't stress this enough, just to be aware of sensory issues within the environment. Any smells, like make sure you're not wearing perfume or cologne. um, any lights or sounds, including the tone and volume of voices. You can't control the students' voices, and I know I've been in three different classrooms recently where there is a screaming child, a child that just screams randomly, very loud. And unfortunately, everyone just has to like get used to it because that's something that kid's working on. But think about your own voice. If you have a really loud, booming voice, could that be causing an issue? And could you adjust that or have a chat with one of your aides that maybe it has like a naturally just kind of like sharp tone of their voice? And that might be an issue for some students. And then Brandon shared a link in the chat. Oh, thank you. Is that this presentation, Brandon? Thank you so much. I assume that it is. So if you want to, if you didn't get the QR code, go ahead and go to the chat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate that. And then internal barriers. So this is where I'm talking about a student who might be neurodivergent, autism, ADHD, anxiety, where there are things making it hard to be fully present at school. Maybe perseverant thoughts, just a lot of distraction. Their mind is racing, or they might have some intrusive thoughts and fears that are just on their mind. They might be depressed. So it's important to use strategies that address specific challenges related to students' disabilities or support needs. So there's a lot of things that you can do to support students with autism spectrum disorder, students with ADHD. It's not really the I'm not, that could be a whole 3 different webinars of its own. So again, like, please just never stop learning and reaching out for new information about neurodiversity to make sure that your teaching is aligned with current best practices. But I know one of you asked specifically about ADHD earlier. So if the student has ADHD and it's severe, you're going to have to majorly adjust your instruction, literally, maybe just to 2 minutes at a time. Like, you might just be demanding no more than 2 minutes of their attention. And that's your starting point. I'm not saying that's how it's going to go all year, but 2 minutes of their attention, give them a break. 2 minutes, give them a break. 2 minutes, give them a break. Then you can teach them how to start telling you that they're going to take their break now, setting a timer. Okay, no problem. 2 minute, pay attention for 2 minutes, then you get a 2-minute break. Like, you would adjust it depending on what you know about the student. Maybe they could do 5 minutes. And then the goal would be to stretch it out and to have a conversation with the student about it. Hey, I know, and if they're really young, this wouldn't apply. But hey, I know it's hard to pay attention sometimes. Let's try just 2 minutes, and then you take a 2-minute break. And then you can tell me if maybe you could do 3 minutes. And I would give rewards. But then also think about their specific interests, because sometimes the students who have autism or ADHD, they might have a very specific interest. And if you can infuse that into the teaching, it can stretch out their attention span. So just a couple of things I want to leave you with, at least to try. All right, moving on now to social stories, and I'm looking at the time. So I'm going to kind of just pass through these slides because I actually went over them at the last webinar, but I know not all of you were there. So just access the slides, and social stories are such a great way to help students navigate challenges. And sometimes it might just be that they're academically disengaged because they're bored and they don't want to engage. So a social story can help them understand the expectation and why it's important to pay attention at school, because it literally might just be like they don't see the point. So this goes over the structure, how to implement it, but I'm going to fast forward to this, and I'm not going to read this, but this is from AI. I just discovered AI for social stories very recently, and I love it. I put in this prompt, grade level 4th prompt, write a social story for a student who does not engage in any academic work. That's all that I wrote, and this is what I got. With AI, it's important to take an 80-20 approach where you can let AI do 80% of the work, but then you need to put in about 20% where you're looking through it and you're editing it and you're fixing it and you're like, that vocabulary is too advanced. My student's not going to understand that. I'm going to make this more personalized. I also love illustrations, especially photos of the student themselves. So you can put in that amount of work, but you don't have to start from scratch. So I got it from Magic School. Here's the link and the QR code. It is free. A lot of it, you can pay for like more stuff, but the social stories part is free. So you just got to search social stories and then you can like favorite it and you have to set up an account. But I haven't paid a dime and I've been able to access it now for a couple of months. So the social stories part, I can vouch it is free. A few reinforcement examples, and then that's it. It is so important that your reinforcers are actually motivating to your students. So always start with a reinforcement inventory. I've linked one example here, but you'd probably want to tweak it or use it as like an example and then create your own. But praise, nonverbal and verbal. If the students are older, you want to make sure it's appropriate to older kids. Sometimes just like a little tap on their desk and a nod is what is really reinforcing to an older student or a shy student. You can make it interest specific. I'm talking like Minecraft, Disney, whatever they're into, food, activities. I am a huge proponent of using an iPad to motivate students because that's what motivates a lot of them. Some of them are obsessed with getting time on electronics, so use that to your advantage. I don't care if you do 30 minutes of instruction and then they get 15 minutes on the iPad. If you're getting 30 minutes of engagement out of that, that's a worthwhile investment. Prizes, time with preferred toys and games, and here are 101 reinforcement ideas right there. So if you could please take this survey, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes and then I'll turn off the recording. While you are starting the survey, I'm going to put the link in the chat so that you can either use the QR code or go from the link. So if you don't mind taking the survey, this helps us can be able to continue to offer these webinars to you. And the next webinar is December 14th, the last one of this series, and I'm going to talk about oppositional defiance disorder. So I will share a little bit about, or I will share about that and some strategies that can help students who have that diagnosis or who just show similar characteristics. And whoops. And I'm going to stop sharing now and I'm going to stop recording. Thanks everyone for joining, and you guys can stay on and I will take more specific questions.
The QR code doesn't work again.
Oh, it
but
does.